So Brian has been in market research since 1974 and has run many globally acclaimed research agencies in Australia, including the Reputation Institute, Harris Interactive, JD Power, Yankelovich, MediaMetrix Jupiter, Australia Market Research, the Online Research Unit, and Australian Online Research and Quality Online Research. Brian has been chairman of AMSRO, president of AMSRS, Australian representative of ESOMAR or ESOMAR, and an adjunct professor at the UTS Business School, as well as on its Business School Advisory Board. Brian worked with Jordan Louviere at UTS, where Jordan was Professor of CENSOC, Centre for Study of Choice, and jointly developed Brandflows, the state-of-the-art choice model to incorporate brand attributes into a model and resultant decision support system. This is the basis of his presentation, and his title today is Brandflows, How Your Brand Will Attract Its Maximum Price. And with that, I'm going to hand over to you, Brian, and to you, Dave. So I'll let you take over from here, Brian.
Dave, do you want to just quickly run through your highlights?
Sure. I'm in Sydney at the moment. I do normally live in Bangkok. As you heard from Craig, I've lived in Japan and many other places in Asia. I've spent 26 years in Asia. Most of my career was with McCaughan, the big global ad agency. And then the last 6 years, I've been sort of an independent consulting working across Asia, helping companies figure out what their brand story is. And I worked out this morning that I've known Brian, I think our first meeting was 1997 at McCann's office in Sydney, when he came in and did this presentation. And I was very new to the ad industry, very new to market research at the time. And all I could remember was sitting there going, God, this guy must be smart because I don't understand a word he's saying. And it's actually still true. I mean, but there you go.
Today, we're going to be talking about Brandflows, which is the art of unbundling the brand attributes in brand equity measurement. How, why, and what does your brand attract its maximum premium price? It measures and understands your real brand equity to ensure you can charge that premium. For a business to exist, it must have a product or service that people want or need, brand awareness, product and service accessibility, but it must successfully attract customers. It really needs to identify meaningful points of differentiation which provide value or brand worth. The problem we all face is choice, the ultimate challenge for any brand manager. Which mix will give me the greatest satisfaction?
So let me just interrupt, Brian, and say that when Brian first shared this platform with me only a few months ago, as somebody who's worked with lots of big brands and lots of brand managers, the biggest problem a brand manager always has is choice, right? I mean, you're always stuck with what do you do? Do you do a promotion? Do you change the price? What do you do in terms of what the competitor's doing? And to be honest, up till now, while there's been a lot of research on what I'm doing and what they're doing, actually having a model that allows you to play around and figure out, look, this is the best choice options was something really new. So that's what got me excited about helping Brian, sort of get this platform out and sort of making it more understandable to the marketplace.
Yeah, and I must give Dave credit. He's been working with us to make this more accessible to people, and sort of his storytelling is going to be obvious in this presentation, hopefully. All right. So moving right along, what you need is successful managers must be able to design the right checklist to find what their brands are worth in order to make better comparisons between brands, to make better investment and return on investment decisions, and make better pricing and margin decisions. What makes your brand valuable? Brands have struggled with what is the actual dollar value of their brand and how to understand and track this in a dynamic market environment. Even the best tools merely provide trade-offs between pricing options and lack a full understanding of how much customers are willing to pay, which brand attributes trigger where the value comes from, and which triggers to press. If you had a research-based dashboard, and Dave will take you through one of these dashboards as a case study in a moment, that made choice simple, you would be able to look at the brand share on the top. You'd be looking at the given price. We can change the price and see what impact that has on brand share. And we can change the attributes to see what changing certain attributes will do to brand equity and willingness to pay a premium for that product. Which is why Brandflows is useful. It's affordable, thorough research displayed so that you can understand your brand and the triggers that will deliver maximum return. We answer the questions to attract a price premium versus a category. We measure what is your brand equity and what is the contribution of each brand attribute, and that is one of the key differences from most other choice models. How much will brand equity rise for each percentage increase in each contributing attribute? So if we were to move our attribute up from 25% to 30%, what will the impact be on the brand equity and people's willingness to buy it? Where to allocate scarce communication dollars. So if you have a communication budget, then how much should you be putting against different key drivers, and how much return on investment is generated for brand image improvement on key attributes. So how you can model to see if you put a certain number of dollars against particular drivers, what is the likely impact and what will be the return of an investment for that communication budget.
So I'm going to take you through an example in a minute. What's important is that we have these different sorts of applications, right? So we can look at the relative premium in the dollars that are being spent. So, you know, what premiums or discounts each brand can charge, how it makes a difference to the competitive marketplace. We can look at equalization of prices. So what happens if everybody has the same price? What difference does that make? Or as we shift prices, and that becomes really important because price flexibility is always probably the hardest decision for any marketer. And then, you know, what kind of premium you can add, right? So one of the things, of course, is, you know, no marketplace is completely fair. We always know that whenever you have a competitive set, there's always somebody who has a, you know, a bigger reputation, whatever, is more established. And so you start to be able to see what the bigger brand can get away with that you can't, or vice versa. And that helps you really sort of get to a balance of what are the things that you could be doing. So there's a whole bunch of cases that we could go through. I'm actually going to take you one that was done on the pizza marketplace, where
Dave, sorry to bug.
Yeah.
Do you want questions before or after, Bill? Like, or do you want to go through the whole presentation and then we ask questions at the end, or?
We can take a question in a minute.
Okay.
I'll just get through this chart.
It's all good. It's all good. I just sorry.
Let me just get through a chart, take you through one example, and then we'll come back and you can ask Brian all the questions, because that way he gets to do all the hard work, right? One of the things that, to just lay out the example, right? So we were looking, this was done a while ago. 4 brands were Pizza Hut, Pizza Haven, Domino's, and Eagle Boys, right? So each brand was described by 8 features. So based upon, I guess, the client input, there was a bunch of different things that were seen as the different sorts of decisions that the brand manager might have to make in terms of things like toppings, type of crust, free delivery. These are different options that they had in terms of promotional attributes. I guess what wasn't mentioned earlier on is that all of this is based on a survey, right? So in this case, 2,000 Australians in an online survey, they get Brian can explain the details of how the survey, for those of you interested, he can explain in a minute how the surveys work and the detail of them. The point for me was that it's real survey based, but gives me real discretionary choice experimentation. So we can, because we've given them all these different choice sets, we get a whole lot of different types of choice data, and we're able to look at the different models. So I think what I'm going to do is drop out now and go, if I can, to a live, where is it? Hold on a second. I've just got to stop sharing this one, and I'll come back a second and I'll start sharing this live feed if I can find it, what I've done with it. Is it this one? Yes.
Okay.
Sorry, did somebody want to ask a question then?
That's all good.
Yeah. Oh, we just got to reload this. There you go. Okay. Can you all see this is a dashboard, right? So if you subscribe to Brandflows and you did a survey for your category, what Brian's team does is the deliverable really is this dashboard. And this is what I found really useful. So I'm used to working with brands, working with all sorts of research companies, and I'm not putting down other research companies and what they do, but quite often what you get is decks, right? You get a lot of PowerPoint charts. Now, this is for my purposes and for the purposes of a typical sort of senior brand manager or a decision maker in a company, this perhaps is much more interesting, right? First of all, they've gamified the approach. So instead of just getting a whole bunch of PowerPoint charts with a whole lot of columns and numbers and things like that, I get this really useful and simple tool. Now, what you can see at the top here is this is the brand shares that are in play at the time of the research. Okay, so the percentage of brand shares, etc., within a given marketplace. Okay, and what they're able to do then is to look at things like variables of attributes. So price, delivery time in minutes. So what the model starts off with a flat rating like this. So let's say that the standard price was $15 for a pizza for all four, and the delivery time was 20 minutes. But then they've added in these options. Now, these are typical in the pizza marketplace, as you will know. These are typical promotional options, right? So what happens if we're offering a 3-topping pizza? What happens if we offer free delivery, thin crust, free dessert, free drink, etc.? The beauty of this model is that I'm allowed to then play around with things. So let's say that I was able to promise, I don't know whether 20 minutes is like typical or not, whatever, wherever you live. But let's say that I was Eagle Boys and I was able to reduce that offer to 10 minutes. You can see that straight away it changes what's likely to be my market share from 29 to 32. Okay, so straight away we can start to see a difference that's happening on that simple idea. Now, let's say that I was looking at a price discounting, and let's say that one of my competitors, Domino's, they reduced to $12 a pizza. Then you can see there's a dramatic difference in the shift in the way the market will go, right? So basically, if I'm Eagle Boys, I'm going to lose a lot. Domino's is going to really come out of that really well. Well, what if I follow tune and I'm Eagle Boys and I switch to $12, right? Suddenly I become hugely competitive again. And those that are not offering $12 pizzas are obviously are going to lag way behind. So that's, really useful in terms of basic modeling like that. Now, let's say I wanted to jump in and start looking at promotional offers. So, typical in a pizza environment might be that Domino's comes in and says, okay, we're going to give you a free drink, free Coke with, Domino's is Pepsi, right? Whatever, free drink with every pizza. And you can see that it shifted it dramatically. So suddenly Domino's becomes a much more potent thing from doing that. What happens if I'm Eagle Boys and I do the same thing? Then you can see that I go back on top, right? So we've both gained over Pizza Haven and Pizza Hut. But, you know, if I match it, I do okay. Now we can go through then and we can start looking at that in all these different combinations. So one of the interesting things might be that, you know, Domino's has a thing where they can offer a free dessert. I don't have a dessert facility. So if they offer a free dessert, they suddenly go up to 34. I'm on 24. But what about, well, I can't do that, but I offer a free drink. How does that change things? Well, you can see that a free drink seems to get more traction than the free dessert. So you can start to compare different offers and the way in which different standard promotional offers. Now, obviously, and Brian can correct me, but when you go in and you initiate the research, you can put in whatever you like in here in terms of what those different, depending on your category, you can advise, okay, we think this is the standard set. Now, I'm sure that Brian and his team would sit there and go, yeah, but if you're in the pizza business, you also have to consider, you know, free delivery, if you haven't mentioned that. So you bring the wisdom of experience to that. But it becomes a very valuable tool in being able to really understand what the difference is in terms of the offers that we can make and the way it shifts around things, okay? And I think this is, as I said, interesting and surprising because of the fact that it's not just about choice, it's actually about allowing me to play with the choices to look at the differences it can really make in the real marketplace. Does that all sort of make sense? Does anybody want me to play with any of these things to show them what difference it makes?
How do you actually, who determines how you actually make the difference?
This is done because in the research that was done, it's a big survey, and then within the survey, it's broken down so that each individual person, right, is given different choice sets. And what they do, they aggregate all these different choice sets to see what that allows them to model out what would be the difference. Okay, so it's not everybody answering the same 30 questions. It's of the 2,000 people, there will be different sets of people answering different combinations of things that allows them to accrue to a much greater database.
It's one creates what they call an experimental design, and you have a set of choices which then allocates a value to every single item that's in those sets of choices, and those values are then built into the model.
So actually, Brian, Dave, there are a lot of questions that have been thrown up, and
yeah.
Dave, you were indicating that you would take questions at some point. Is now a good time? Because it might be worth just
Yeah. I think if we can take questions now, and then we can go back to the last few charts that just really summarize some stuff.
All right.
So do people want to verbally just ask the questions rather than just sit in the chat room?
Yeah.
I think. So do you want me to ask the first one?
Sure.
Go ahead.
So Dave and Brian, I find this really fascinating. So is the survey, a couple of questions on the survey. So is it, I assume it's statistically relevant, the survey that goes out, but how do you cater for the multitude of different demographics for a market like this for pizzas? How do you cater for the different demographics in different suburbs and different cities for this? Because does this just look at their market Australia-wide or US-wide or whatever, wherever it's based, or is it by respective areas?
Your starting point in a traditional study is that you do the general population and you're able to cut the choice model by any specific demographic. So, for example, the one that Dave's just presented could be shown to you by 18 to 25-year-olds, which may have a totally different share of market and different values for the different attributes. So this one is general population, total population. You can cut it by any sets of demographics. So what you're looking for in the first place is you can do a general population study, or you could decide to just do a pizza user study, or you could be doing a study amongst users of Domino's to see what the impact would be if Eagle Boys or Pizza Haven were to do certain competitive things. How would they react to them?
So in the tool, but it doesn't necessarily differentiate between, say, the eastern suburbs and the western suburbs as to...
If you were to run a
different
cut of the eastern suburbs, you could have a decision support system which looks at the eastern suburbs and one which looks at the western suburbs.
Okay.
Yeah, Mark, as somebody who's been the client to Brian, but the client to many research studies over the years, of course, what happens is all the time is you got to work up before it starts, right? So if you know that's going to be a big issue, and if you take the big cities in Melbourne and you go, inner city versus the west or whatever it is, you have to tell them that that's one of the demographics you're going to be looking at. You can't afterwards suddenly say, and we want to know about how, immigrants from Sudan actually think about this. Well, that may not have been covered off in the, the survey profile. But the great thing about this, and Brian, I'm showing you a simplified version, and Brian showed me some other examples. I've played with them. The great thing is the way in which you can actually model these different things, and you can really get to some detail. Now, again, I've shown you, we decided to show you a Pizza Hut or a pizza one because pizza is just something everybody understands, right? And I think all of us sort of understand the dynamics of that marketplace. If you look at some of the more other examples, and Brian can share the links to you. He's got some interesting examples from like the airline industry, and you start to look at that and you start to be able to go, okay, what would be the difference between economy and business class? What would be the difference between, coming interstate and between different states? Because quite obviously, the Sydney-Melbourne route is very different in the dynamics from what would be happening if you were looking at Sydney versus Perth routes and things like that, right?
So I get it. So for big major brands, I absolutely get it. What about for FMCG and not big brands, more SME or large SME, organizations?
You can have any client looking at their product and brand set. So it's something which, if you see value, then you can do a study. That's what market research is about.
So Brian, for example, would you be able to use this tool for the wine industry, looking at different wine brands and competitors for different wine
absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I saw one of the questions was from Craig, and he was asking, are you bringing in profitability and market share and product quality in the mix? Now, we did a study for a fast food chain where we had choices as a starting point, which is similar to what you're looking at now, but we were able to build into the decision support system the actual cost of the product. So if you were to move the price from $15 to $12, we can see here what would happen to the share, but we can also build in a profitability element where we can say, by increasing share at a reduced price, what is the profit going to be compared with fewer sales at an increased price? And you can choose the optimum pricing and profitability, so you can make those strategic decisions. So if you have that element, you can build it into the model.
I think one of the really interesting things about this is that if you've got a premium brand and you discount that consistently, it can actually harm your brand equity. And Mark, you mentioned the wine industry. I actually did some pricing work for Pernod Ricard. And when they sort of reduced their prices on Jacobs Creek, it had quite a negative impact on brand equity over time. Yeah. And this tool could measure that quite effectively by reverse engineering that data.
Exactly. That's a really good example, right? So one of the things that I quite often get involved in is where brands that have, recently in the last few years, I seem to have collected a lot of clients that are brands that have been around for quite a long while. And not necessarily big brands. I'm talking about sort of, not mom and pop shops, mid-sized companies that have been around for a long while and are struggling in the face of big competitors and big new competitors or big modern competitors. And one of the great things here is it allows you to actually have a look at, okay, what are your brand strengths and what should you reflect on, and then not go berserk, right? So, and typically, you know, what you've just mentioned is a typical example in so many categories, which is you don't necessarily have to reduce your price just because you've got a big competitor who can offer massive discounts on price. That may not do you any good, right? Because A, you can't financially match it, and second, in the long term, and secondly, it may be depleting the worth of your brand. And I will point out that, you know, some of the examples that that Brian can share are from some pretty, you know, pizza we picked because it was one everybody understands, right? But, you know, he's got like case studies for like the TV sound systems, right? Which is something that I knew nothing about until I looked at the study, right? But you can get into quite finite type categories, those sorts of things that would allow you to get some real flexibility on your thinking.
One of the biggest challenges in my experience with this stuff is actually isolating the impact of the value drivers. Is that something that you think is possible?
Well, that is exactly the key differentiator for Brandflows, that we are building into the choice sets the differentiators and the key drivers.
Like, for example, you've got sort of macro things going on, you know, you're moving different levers, you know, how are you isolating the impact of one lever or value driver? The two things are happening. One is you're measuring the brand equity against pricing and any other macro features. And secondly, you are measuring the brand image so that you're able to interlock individual attributes to the brand equity. So it's an implied value for the individual drivers that you can then build into the model to say, if we were to increase performance on taste by 10%, what is the equity going to do, and how much will that allow you to charge a premium or hold your existing customers if somebody else came in at a discount?
No, awesome. Brian, Dave, can I just ask, this is very, very product centric, what I'm seeing here, although delivery was one of them. Given the high number of service industries that we kind of deal with in this world today, does this lend itself to that as well? You know, to service businesses that are less tangible in their asset or in their product. Can you comment on that?
It's if you can imagine the core, you can add to the core, but the core is the brand, the price, and the features. So if you had a service business, let's call it even just a market research company, and you had brand A versus, say, 55.5 versus Nielsen, and you were offering a advertising testing study, you would say at the base price of $20,000, which would you choose? Now suddenly quality online research is dropping its price to $15,000. Will you still choose Nielsen or 55.5? And you've got some sense of whether people value the brand, or those other brands, and are willing to pay a premium for it. You then build in the features that, or the differentiators that the service offers. So we offer understanding, quality, so detailed choice models or decision support systems, and some of those things are then going to trade off against price and make the choices move.
How do you account for inflation, Brian?
How do you account for inflation? I'm assuming that inflation is something which is dynamic over time, and you are, at any point in time, you're looking at how would you choose between the different brand options that you have with the different features and the different pricing. If you want to start looking at profitability and inflation, then if you say, I can reduce my price to a certain level and make a 20% margin, but if I'm projecting out and inflation is going to increase the cost of my goods, then I probably don't want to be reducing our price. You can build that into the model.
So so Brian, if you so the assets of Brandflows is the reporting and the methodology of slicing and dicing and changing what ifs in a very fun way. Is that correct?
Well, the starting point, and I think David pointed it out, is that if you don't put it into the mix, you won't be able to slice and dice it.
I understand exactly. But at the end of the day, you can take any research. So as a model, you don't actually have to do the research to actually put this in the model. So you can actually sell this to potential research houses, or a piece of research can be given to you. How easy is it to actually lob the information into the Brandflow reporting system?
I guess it's a part of it is trying to make sure that there is a relationship between any information that you get, which is like big data, and the data that you're collecting. So, there's an assumption that if you are going to ask people their opinion, it has a relationship between what's going to happen in terms of sales and behavior.
Get it. So I think the question that I'm asking is it possible to sort of use...
We're asking, is it possible to use Nielsen data to back into the model?
Exactly. So for example, if someone's just created a report and it's like a PowerPoint big report that's been given to someone, how easy would it be to take that data, or is it possible for someone to do it, to do it themselves, and lob the relevant data into your model, and like for a couple of bucks, they can actually gamify their research?
I think as a tail wagging the dog, the gamification occurs in the choice permutations that you create.
I understand, but everyone's got their own choice permutations. If you've actually got the choice permutations, how easy is it for the research company or the organization to lob those choice permutations into the Brandflow model?
Can I say?
Yeah, I think what they're getting at, Brian, is this. I think that, and let me just answer that on behalf of. As I understand it, that's not a model that they're looking at them at the moment, right? So at the moment, the Brandflows model is they do the research. It's very distinctly designed to fit these things and maximize how you can then use the tool, right? And so at the moment, they're not really looking at taking other people's existing surveys and plugging it in. But I guess that might be something they look at in the future.
To that, Dave, Ivan, we do a lot of surveys, and the reality is the survey is the slave to the outcomes. So you can't make the outcomes a slave to the survey. And so you have to build the survey to develop the outcomes.
Sure. But Mark, if you've actually built the survey, so you've got a survey, you do lots of surveys.
Yeah, no, I know where you're coming from, but that's not the way it works. And I think Brian, that's what Brian's saying is,
okay,
you've got to use his survey, not take other data, because you're then polluting your outcomes. Is that fair, Brian?
Yeah, except for the case of where we actually did look at price and cost of delivering fast food items. We were then able to say, a 20% share at a lower price is going to mean that there's a lower profit, and we could actually model the level of profitability. But
I think the modeling tool should actually be completely separate to the research tool, to the research server.
Well, the research survey is the starting point, but we've designed the research survey in Brandflows to allow us to do the modeling.
Okay.
When you deliver this to clients, is it anonymized and aggregated? I'm just kind of thinking around data privacy and all that sort of stuff.
Well, the starting point is anyone who does a survey is protected in terms of privacy. So everything is aggregated. You're not telling them that John Smith has certain preferences and choices, and if you reduce price, you're going to get John Smith to do something with you.
Okay. So Brian, just one more question. Sorry, from me. if we've got 20 forums, and let's say we have 80 forums of 20 professionals each, couldn't those forums actually be used as research tools that should generate money, and that money could be sort of reimbursed to the members?
That you're talking about separate from Brandflows.
Yeah, completely separate. I'm just
yeah,
saying.
I get what you mean. Yes, and I'll be honest. There's an organisation that I belong to up in Asia that basically uses that model, right? So it's a business connection sort of same sort of idea, I think, that you have with BBG, I guess, and they have invited me to speak at a couple of their events, and I found out that what they do is they use their membership. I think they have about 3,000 members.
This is Asia Connect. This is Gary.
No, it's a different one. It's a different one. But it runs similar to Asia Connect. But it has about 3,000 members, and what they do is they use that membership to drive surveys across the members, but then use the members to actually drive responses across within segments. So if they have 30 members that are in the, industrial supplies marketplace, they will use them to drive surveys and things like that.
Interesting.
Yeah. Get in touch with me. I can let you know more about that.
Thanks, Dave.
All right, guys. I think we should wrap it there, guys, just so we can get through a bit more. And we're running out hard to 9 o'clock with another 5 minutes to go, kind of in terms of just the 9 o'clock hard line for a couple of people leaving. Brian, would you take over again, or Dave?
Dave, have you finished your section?
Yeah. Can you see the charts now with the?
So Brandflow releases you from vague brand measurements.
Yeah. You want to keep going, Brian?
Yep. No. So Brandflow releases you from vague brand measurements, where many organizations measure and track brands, but do not use methods based on real understanding of why people pay. Many publicly traded firms use stock market data, which is market aggregated and requires assumptions based on investor perceptions, not on brand buyers' views. Others use rating scales that have no real scientific basis and many well-documented biases. Your organization needs real valid measures, not ad hoc guesses. Brandflows provides a scientific way to measure the dollar equity of attributes making up your brands. It uses Nobel Prize-winning choice models and choice experiments to measure brand values, and it offers the option of extending those experiments to provide the dollar values of brand attributes. Brandflows provides multiple measures to allow managers quick and easy understanding of key aspects of their brand's performance. It embeds the pricing results in a user-friendly decision support system. As you've seen, DSS lets you query choice experiment pricing data to forecast brand choices in different scenarios and how pricing impacts strategic outcomes like market share and revenue. A decision support system can produce brand value measures with real dollar impact on pricing. Brandflows provides brand performance measures at both any specific point in time and over time. It can give you the implied price margin relative to others, the willingness to pay differences for brands, the price elasticities for brands, in other words, price sensitivity, the pricing clout or the impact on other brands, and pricing vulnerability, how changing prices for other brands will impact your share. It can also measure brand choice of changes over time, like the base, the minimum expected market share for a given reference price over time, the ceiling, the maximum market share expected for the same reference price, and the swing, the difference between ceiling and base measuring volatility over time. And swing has two components. One is the trend, and the two is a stochastic component to capture measurement uncertainty. And it also provides comparable relative measures across brands.
The great thing here is that you can quantify everything. You can quantify, as we've discussed, and open to more questions and stuff. But we can basically, using this tool, we can quantify the equity of the brand along every attribute. Look at the differences in the percentage that it affects pricing, and then how pricing itself will then affect the role of attributes. So it goes both ways. And while the example that I showed you was pretty simplified, it does allow you to really move both ways. So you can see, okay, if I do this, it's going to shift my price. If I'm going to shift my price and I do this, it's going to make a difference. And all these things can sort of allow you to really change your model. Now, if you're in a business that is relatively fast moving in terms of the competitors are very dynamic, it allows you to make sort of very instant decisions. Okay, I've just been notified that the retailer is doing this. That's great. Oh, the retailer is going to be selling my competitor at X tomorrow. Then I know I can do, if I do this, I can get a response. All right. But I think the bigger thing is the strategic decision making that it really helps you make. And importantly, the return on investment that I can get from making shifts and how that will affect the image of the brand. So if I do this and this, will it have any real effect? What kind of effect? Is it worth my while doing it? And these are basic decisions that we all have to make every day on their different products and services.
So Brian, so that I can keep my eyes and ears open for potential referrals to you, what would you say is your ideal client? What's your perfect client?
It can be. I mean, we've done work in large services like airlines, banking. I mean, the perfect choice model situation is that you've got what would you do if your mortgage rates were at 2.5% and everyone else was at 3%? What would happen if you moved your mortgage rates up to 3% or 3.5% to your market share? Now you need to then start looking at some of the features that would help you trade off and charge a premium, and what the value of those features were, because there's fairly large money. So anyone who's spending large money on communication and advertising would benefit from having a choice model or a Brandflows model to help guide them and allow them to do gamification.
So essentially large B2C market dynamic organizations.
Yes, that would be the major clients.
Does it help if they have sort of complex value propositions, or does that not matter?
It sort of doesn't really matter, because one of the things that you are looking at in terms of the permutations is to try and unbundle those large complex permutations. Yeah. Okay. I think we're on to the last chart here, but the one before it pretty much just ran through the fact that we started with what are we going to talk about today. We've shown that we can measure brand equity, that we can measure the contribution of each brand attribute to overall equity, to identify the rise for each percentage point increase and allocate scarce communication dollars to attributes, and that it is by creating something which is difficult to understand, scientific, as David says. We can model the ROI generated by change. We can embed pricing results in a user-friendly DSS, and we can optimize retention relative to competitive price reductions, as well as maximize attraction of new users with a focus on key drivers in communication. So it's something which can be used to improve performance amongst your existing clients, to improve sales and conversion to prospects, and to preempt and respond to competitive activity. Thank you. And thanks, Dave, for your help on this.
You stop sharing, please, Brian. Dave, thank you.
Yeah.
So as a new
I have a
entrant,
question, Brian.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, you're right.
Yep.
Okay. Thanks. I was just wondering, who is your gatekeeper into the organization in getting this traction? So usually this kind of work would sit within the marketing department, but who is actually a gatekeeper to get traction in a sale?
we've had this discussion many times, and I think the person who's the gatekeeper is the insights director or insights manager. But often the value of something like this is going to be most attractive to the CFO and the CEO. So if they start seeing something that can deliver these benefits, then they might start asking the gatekeeper to investigate and talk to us.
Thank you.
Yeah, if I could just chip in there, my own experience with using new types of market research modeling like this is quite often it's, as Brian said, like CFOs. Because the people that are, no offense to Mark, I've been an insights director, but you tend to be sort of channeled down. This is the way we do it. We've created a model for how we do stuff. Oh, it's going to be a pain in the neck if I have to shift to a different type of model of how we do it. Whereas the CFO is more interested in how we're going to maximize profit, right? Just pure and simple. And so if you go to him and you sort of say, look, you know, he'll be able to play with this and he'll be able to talk to the brand directors about why haven't we tried this? Because we could up the profitability, or, you know, we can increase sales, whatever. That's going to be great. So CFO contacts would understand this, and it's not about, believe me, you know, like Brian could talk endlessly about the how the modeling is done, how the research is done, the details of it. That's the insights director. The CFOs don't care, right? They just care about the outcome, and so that makes it an easier discussion.